So what happens when you take a character like Thor and you put him in a $200 million Saturday Night Live skit? Well, you get Thor Love and Thunder, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, and let me explain. Hey, what's going on, everyone? How you guys doing? Matt Jarbo here, 3 Buck Theater, and yeah, so Thor Love and Thunder. I went to the very first screening of it yesterday. I've had about 24 hours now to sit on my opinion of it, and it's not the greatest movie I've ever seen. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it has left me with a lot of conflicting thoughts and feelings and emotions because the movie is relatively divisive, and it's divisive in a way that it probably shouldn't be. It is a movie that is fun. Make no mistake about that. It's very fun. It's very funny. It's Chris Hemsworth being as funny as he can possibly be, but it doesn't necessarily fly in regards to being a good Thor movie. Now, the reason why I say that is because I have said since Ragnarok, following through to Infinity War and then Endgame, that gave us a great emotional journey for the character of Thor. We got to see him deal with loss and with suffering and with regret and PTSD. And then at the end of Endgame, he finds himself enough to go work with the Guardians of the Galaxy, effectively becoming the Asgardians of the Galaxy. But in this movie, he ultimately spends his time still trying to find himself during the post-Endgame days. And I guess that works, right? He's with a family. He's with a new group of people. They're doing things, but it's not what he wants. It's not what he feels he needs to do. He's just still kind of lost in transition. That is, of course, until we re-encounter Jane Foster, who now has stage 4 cancer. She is dying, and she is seeking any and all help and cure and remedy that she can, even as far as space Viking magic, as they keep basically trying to allude to in this movie. Now, I will be describing spoilers as we go on. Just make no mistake about that. I will say, actually, first things first, the opening scene of the movie, to me, was amazing. And it really set the tone for how well Christian Bale was going to be in this film. And believe me, he was great in this movie. The opening of the movie with him and his daughter suffering on a dying and desolate planet, praying to their god for any kind of water or food or sustenance of any kind, while the daughter draws away and obviously is just fading away and fading away and fading away to the point of when she literally dies in Gorr's arms and there's nothing he can do to stop it or change it or whatever. He literally is just helpless, but still hoping that his god, his deity, will be what resurrects the girl or saves him or whatever. But then as he's mourning her death, literally sleeping, like cuddled up with her grave, which I thought was just like such a powerful image. Like this, like I have 2 daughters. I have a 4.5-year-old and basically a 3-year-old. And all I wanted to do was like hug my kids in the opening of this movie. It really hit me as a parent, especially the end of the film. And so he, like hears a voice and he goes off into this oasis and you think that it's going to be fake. It's all imaginary, right? It's just something in his mind, but no, it's real. And these gods are celebrating a fresh kill of a demon with the necro sword that kills gods. And they offered that information up very freely, which I thought was really fascinating. It was like, oh, okay, plot device. Here we go. But cool. They just, gave us the information, but the Necrosword chooses Gorr and Gorr just slaughters the god after he's, the god basically laughs in his face. The god just goes, you're worthless. Your existence means nothing. You only exist to worship me and die. And there will be more of you once you're gone. It doesn't matter to me, which was a very interesting take on gods in general. And if I had to, ask the question like, hey, is Taika Waititi an atheist? I would probably get the answer of yes on that one, because no god in this movie is given really any kind of deity, any kind of like reverence. They're all pretty much shitty individuals. In fact, they kind of get called that multiple times. And you get to this point later on when they get to like omnipotency, whatever the name of the city is, where Zeus is at. And the thing with Gorr that I like, though, is Gorr then starts going on this rampage, but you feel his anger, you feel his rage, and Bale did such an amazing job with this, especially when he kidnaps all the Asgardian kids. Those are some of my favorite scenes in the movie. I thought the whole thing, there's a whole issue, like there's a whole bit in the movie about like Astrid, who is Heimdall's son, changing his name to Axel, and them bickering over a name change. And I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever, it is what it is. Again, that joke felt like it went on a little bit too long and it never came up again. But the character of of Axel was pretty cool. And he has the same kind of sight that Hemdall has. And so he's able to communicate with Thor and bring Thor through these like visions into the kids where they're at to be able to talk with them. And I thought that was kind of like stupid. Like, it was cool the first time, like, okay, we can communicate, but then Thor shows up and he starts like retelling the kids about like the fights that they've had and all sorts. It's just, it felt really weird. It didn't really make a lot of sense. Like, I get why they did it. It just felt a little bit odd to me. But then, of course, you know, we get to meet Jane Foster again during a battle at Asgard, our new Asgard, and she is now Mighty Thor, and Thor himself is grappling with this concept about like, hey, wait a minute here, hold on, why is my hammer with you? Well, and then there's this whole like love triangle between Stormbreaker and Mjolnir and Thor, and it's funny, but it does kind of overstay its welcome a little bit, which is where it kind of gets towards like SNL skit level kind of comedy at times. It's really just like, okay, you've made the joke, you don't need to keep remaking the joke throughout the entire film. It just kind of went a little bit too far, I think, a little bit. You know, and then like they team up with like Korg and Valkyrie and Mighty Thor and Jane, and they all head off to, you know, to go find Zeus and to get his Thunderbolt. And Russell Crowe steals it as Zeus, in my opinion. He was great, kind of being like very over the top, very Italian, right? Very emotional, very, you know, out there. He's got a little bit of a lisp and he's got like a little dressy thing that he wears, and he's very flamboyant, which is going to anger some people who really don't like the fact that there is same-sex representation in this movie, even if it's done relatively subtly and in a way where lines of dialogue can be cut out of the movie, and never mind a mustache. That will most likely be changed for overseas releases, to be fair, because it's Disney being Disney, and God forbid they want to upset the natural order of things. By the way, I'm air quoting that. In no way do I mean that really. And certain countries in the Middle East or China. There's that. So like, you know, they go there and it, like, they even mention Christ, by the way. They say the carpenter God, and we all know who that is, but we don't actually see him, which is probably for the best. Nor did they even reference Muhammad or you know, any Buddha or any of the other gods, the other deities here. But they talk about like how the gods are basically just like, they have to patrol their specific areas. Like, that's where they live. They only operate in their areas. And that to me was kind of weird, where it's like, okay, so the old gods, they found a way to work within their area. But then now these gods are basically just like, we're going to go to this party city where there are open talks about, you know, yearly orgies, and we're just going to leave everybody behind. And that was the vibe I got from that stuff. I really enjoyed the time spent here. I thought the world building was fun. I thought Russell Crowe killed it in the part. And then of course, I thought the action scene here with everybody beating up all the guards and whatnot was great. And then like Thor killing Zeus was pretty funny. Well, obviously no one ever really dies in these movies, let's be fair. So, you know, they get all that and they head off to go and find Gorr in the realm of shadows. And when they enter there, what I really enjoyed about that was on the way there's the reconnection scene between Thor and Jane, where they talk to each other, and like there was a lot of emotion. And again, like watching Thor's journey from 2011 to now, so 11 years in this role, 11 years with, you know, with Jane Foster. I mean, pining over her ever since Avengers Age of Ultron, when it came out that they had broken up and everything else, and then having them back together and then finally getting out those emotions. Never mind, we had seen how the relationship fell apart, or how their relationship bloomed and blossomed, and then how their relationship fell apart. And it's a very interesting commentary about just how people grow and then can sometimes grow apart, but then find themselves together later on, which I really enjoyed, actually. I thought, as far as like relationship discussions or having, showing what almost it feels like a really pretty decent real life representation of relationships, was very fascinating for the movie. And I really quite like that. Plus they have really great chemistry, and I've always liked them together in a romance. So for me, that was a big thing. I was really enjoying this stuff. But when they get to the Shadow Realm and they fight Gorr, I like when it went black and white, I was like, oh, it went noir, and it played it so well. That was my favorite scene of the movie, just because it was like the way it was shot, the way that they did it, the effects were wonderful. And it worked out real well, because ultimately we find out that Gorr needs Stormbreaker in order to open up the door to eternity, which is the center of the universe, which basically grants him a single wish. Thor's under the belief that he was going to wish to kill all the gods. I think Gorr was going to, want to resurrect his daughter But then I think the Necro Sword would have probably pushed him to kill all the gods. But then I'm like, oh, okay, using movie logic, they're going to get there. Jane is going to be sick. And then Thor is going to use his wish to resurrect Jane. That was my take when we discovered this whole particular plot point. But then, Valkyrie gets, stabbed by Gorr. She's out for the count, just like Lady Sif was, because we found her earlier in a very brief scene with Jaimie Alexander back. Okay, cool, but I'm always good with Lady Sif. They end up going back to Asgard, and we find out Jane is, she is really sick. If she uses Mjolnir one more time, it's going to kill her, which is a very interesting way of looking at that. Because, as we find out, when she uses the hammer, it thrusts out all the chemo, making her basically her body can't fight it back. So she thinks it's prolonging her life, when in reality, it's killing her faster. It's just it's a very interesting dynamic. Storytelling. I know it's from the comic as well, and I would have liked to have spent more time talking about it, but again, they don't really want to bog you down with the cancer stuff in this movie. They don't want to really make you feel sad. But when Thor and Jane are talking, and when she's in the hospital, I teared up, man. I teared up. I was all like, because it was just, he's like laying his heart out. He's like, I love you. And she's like, basically, I love you too. And it's just like all of this, he spent all those years feeling crappy about the way things went, and he didn't handle it correctly, and everything else he's dealt with, again, the loss of his mother, the loss of his brother multiple times, his father, his home, his eye, his people. I mean, everything. Like, he's had this very traumatic and tragic life that oftentimes gets played for a laugh, because that's his coping mechanism, is to deflect with humor. And I think that was really on point here for when it worked. There were times where it didn't, but there was times when it really did. And then they have this really great moment, and he's like, look, I'm going to leave you here. I'm going to go deal with this, and I'm going to come back, but Jane knows, like, she knows it ain't going to really work. And so ultimately, when he goes to confront Gorr and he saves the kids, what I thought was great though, is he kind of pulled a Shazam, right? Where he used Thunderbolt to imbue the powers of Thor, albeit temporarily, to these kids who decided to just basically start messing up these shadow monsters. It was a fun scene. That's definitely for the families right there. But then, Gorr and Thor fight. Gorr, obviously better than Thor, kicks his ass. Jane shows up, does all that stuff. They end up going into eternity. Jane loses her ability to be Thor. She's basically dying. Gorr is right there. At the center, at eternity, no longer having the Necro Sword because it's been destroyed, so its hold on him isn't there. And you can just see the pain and suffering. He's like, I'm going to die, but it's like, I could resurrect my daughter, but there's like no one here to look after her. There's no one here to watch her. She'll be alone. And then Jane's like, no, she won't. And she looks at Thor, because Thor had wanted to have kids early on. We learned that. And Thor accepts it. And then, of course, from there, Gorr wishes for his daughter to be resurrected. So they get in final goodbye, and then Jane passes. And that part also made me tear up. I thought that was really sad. I didn't cry at Tony Stark. I didn't cry, but I was like, it was welling up. I was like, whatever. I'm a softie. I'm a big ass softie. Okay. And then, Gorr dies, and now he's got this child. And he ends up, taking her with him. And she's kind of imbued with the powers of a god at this point. And so, Valkyrie's back at New Asgard, training the younger kids to be warriors. Sif is there, also helping out. New Asgard is doing well again. And Thor has now taken the girl under his wing. She's now his adopted daughter. And it's funny because it shows him in like a house. He's trying to make her pancakes and she doesn't want to eat them or whatever. And it's a total like father, 7-year-old daughter dynamic. And having a 4.5-year-old, holy crap, did that resonate with me so much. So much. Love my kid, but so much. And then what I loved about that though was like what they exit and he's like, okay, see the people over there, they're good. And the people over there, they're bad. Here's Stormbreaker. I have Mjolnir. And let's go out and fight these guys. And that's where it ends. But what was really funny about that, as they're running out of the spacecraft, if you look, it's modeled after a Winnebago, which I don't know that's a Spaceballs reference, but at the end of the movie, they're running out of what appears to be a Winnebago. And they've kind of named, they've named themselves Love and Thunder. That's how Korg spells it. And so it's a nice way to kind of tie it back in together. It's a nice little pitch. It was a cute movie. The post-credit scene dealing with Zeus still being alive and then sending Hercules after Thor. So this is setting up Thor 5. And then at the final one, we find out that Jane goes to Valhalla, is greeted by Heimdall, and the two are there, meaning that Jane is not dead. Heimdall is not dead. No one ever really dies in these movies, obviously. So they're going to find a way to bring it back, probably in Thor 5 or something else. I know I saw Grace Randolph make a comment about like, oh yeah, no, just, put it on a Disney Plus show. And you're like, no, just put it in an effing movie, dude. Just put it in an effing movie and be done with it. But at the end of the day, I have mixed feelings on the film. It was good in many ways. It was lackluster in other ways. I really enjoyed the back half of the movie. I think if I were like, when it hits Disney Plus in a month and a half, I watch it again. Obviously you can watch it with your family. There's some mild swearing. The visuals are good. But I think if it was me, I probably would just go to like the halfway point and watch the last hour of the movie, because that's where I feel it's the best. I don't know what exactly Taika was trying to do with some of this stuff. I feel like he had a lot of pressure on him coming off of Ragnarok. I think that there was a lot there with the pandemic and how they were trying to like shoot on the volume and shoot in Australia. And they were really trying to make it work. Some things worked, some things didn't. The goats were fantastic. They were really funny. And I like the characters, but I feel like the story at some points kind of went a little south. But that's just my take on it. What did you think of Thor: Love and Thunder? Let me know in the comments. And if also you have anything you want me to review, let me know as well, and I'll take a look at it. I'll see you guys later. Have yourself a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys. Peace out.